Hello, this is the voice of Stuart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of vital conversations that I have with global soul stewards from all over the world who provide us with an understanding of how we can create a new hierarchy of values that is absolutely significant at this unique time of becoming. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. And hello, here we are, the wonderful Xane Daniel, everybody, is sitting with us in this extraordinary place, this oasis of deep dialogues. Welcome, Xane. Welcome, 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 welcome. You are the 12th male soul steward that has appeared in the last season of Deep Dialogues. And you are the creme de la creme. This is the final Deep Dialogue for a break. We go into Easter, and then there'll be a wonderful happening of 12 ladies that I'm beginning to recruit right now.
So well, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to see you here. And welcome all those people who are tuning in, Stacy and Corinne. Let me introduce you to who Xane is, as I normally do. So Xane Daniel is a Hathor Energy Healer, a publisher, inspirational speaker, spiritual teacher, director of the higher Self Expo, who teaches us how to raise our vibrational frequency and to step into our divine power. His graphic novel series, Righteous, and his modality, Soul Essence Activation, are powerful catalysts on the pathway of enlightenment for readers and clients alike. Xane was once a highly successful video games producer, and yet in 2013 he discovered a profound connection with a number of extra-dimensional spirits who particularly were the Hathors, Arcturians, and the Andromedans. During his Soul Essence Activation, Xane incorporates intention and harmonics to bring forth the soul's essence, raising the vibrational frequency for all through his unique unconditional love, and therefore guiding clients to a place of rich inner peace and forward movement ascension. Xane Daniels, tell us about the video game production company that you had.
Okay, so I was a producer in that video game company. It wasn't my personal company, but yeah, I was there in the same place for 22 years and worked on titles on the Xbox and the PlayStation and the PC, all kinds of different things. Even got to work on Oculus Rift, so got to do some virtual reality games. So it was quite the experience, and it was my childhood passion. So it was an easy transition from that, as I was creating games on my own, and then it was easy to get hired. And so if we think about it from the perspective of, I followed my highest excitement. It was my passion as a child, and it led me into a career where I met all kinds of amazing people. And it was because of that career that I then had that awakening in 2013. And so here I am now.
Mm. And so presumably as a child, you began playing the video games, and suddenly your imagination was overtaken by the wonder, by the pleasure, by the extraordinary vistas that you were tuning into. What do you feel, in the whole context of what video games bring us today? How do they help us open up the expanse of our consciousness?
Well, a lot of video games are not actually doing that. and that was one of the reasons that I left. One of the last titles that I worked on was Mortal Kombat 10, which is one of the most violent video games that exists. And during that experience, especially when we were about 4 hours late in delivering it to Steam, the PC platform that you could download it and play it at home, we were 4 hours late on delivering it. And our office received death threats from players who did not have their game. And I remember the owner coming to me and saying, "What the heck is wrong with these people? Why are they threatening us?" I said, "Well, think about the target audience here. We're creating a violent game, and if they don't have their violent game, they're going to threaten violence. It only makes sense to me. And it was at that point that I said, I don't really need to be in this industry anymore. I mean, I was already on my way out, but that just hammered home that what I want to do is something much bigger and better and helpful rather than not helpful. But that all said, there are video games that are very high vibrational and that bring all kinds of wonderful opportunities for players. And they aren't just violent. They are problem solving and discovering of the light and all kinds of interesting things. But, you know, when I stepped out of that video game industry, I also stepped out of my interest in video games. So if you were to ask me, hey, tell us some video games that you think are of that higher vibration, I actually wouldn't be able to tell you right now because I've stepped aside. I took a complete break from that, and I would have to do research to dive back in.
I know the feeling. The same thing happened for me 12 years ago in relation to the entertainment industry. But at the same time, they are not particularly the genre that you were talking about, the Mortal Kombat, but there are other areas that are extremely consciousness producing or expanding. What, you know, in terms of the higher points of your experience during that time, what do you feel were the major merits of expansion, you know, moving away from the warship that you were talking about into the complete opposite, perhaps? What were the merits?
The merits. So I want to clarify your question. What's the reason for doing that, or what was the benefit of doing that?
Well, again, what I'm thinking of is the macro nature of consciousness. You know, if we see that cyberspace is an extension of our own consciousness, and therefore it becomes this vast field of intentionality that we can play in, we can create in, or we can make war in. And so, you know, moving away from the warfare aspect, because obviously as soon as we touch into the divine, we're touching into the fact that love is all there is. And the extrapolations of love, of course, move us into the expression of compassion and empathy, the playfulness and the innocence of the human soul. Blessed are the children, for they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. And we are talking about games playing. And of course, when the child begins to play, they begin to explore vistas of consciousness that are highly enriching. So there was really that platform that I was beginning to look into as an extension of our consciousness.
Yeah, I understand completely. Okay, so here's something that I talk to my clients and the people that take my classes. One of the ways to look at this experience here on this planet is that we are essentially playing a video game. We are here playing the video game maybe called Earth, and we get to pick a character, and we take a look at the astrology, and we get to say, oh, I want to play this game because this is going to happen to this character, and this other thing is going to happen to this character, and something else, positive, negative, all the possible things that happen to us. And when we go ahead and we look at life from this perspective, then we don't take it so seriously. We go, hey, this is a place to play and experiment. This is a place to offer love and support. This is actually a place to take risks, and it's okay to do so because it is just a game after all. So I like it from that standpoint very much. And because when you do step into a video game, you are taking on the role of a totally new character and experiencing a completely different life. Even in a Mortal Kombat style game, you are still doing that. So you are having the opportunity to go ahead and have multiple lives. And you're getting to do that anytime you want to sit down in front of a game. And if we think about it, I mean, Elon Musk even says that the chance that this is base reality is very low. In fact, given any advancement of technology at all, we will eventually get to the point where we will create a video game that feels so real that we don't even know that we are playing a game, that we can make it so that our minds forget that we're playing a game. We can make it so that all of our senses are completely surrounded by this new artificial experience. So the chances that we are in base reality and that we're not playing a game where we created a game, where we created a game, where we created a game, 33,000 an infinite number of layers deep. It's very highly possible that that's what's actually happening, and that we are not in base reality, that we are all playing a video game right now. And so we could look at it from that perspective when we talk about spirituality. Much of the spirituality conversations have game-like elements to them. If you dissect almost anything, you can see, oh, okay, well, yeah, it totally makes sense that we're playing a game. You think of sacred geometry, very mathematical. You think of quantum physics, the concept that we've got a particle that can simultaneously exist in two locations. It could be that where we're not looking, there's nothing there, because we're not there to observe it. And that's a technique that video games use, that when you're playing through a space, the game isn't rendering what's behind you, because that would be too computationally expensive for your computer. So the only way that that it actually works is only what you're looking at. Couldn't it be the same thing? I don't like to talk a lot about this topic because it isn't totally my area of expertise, but it is a really interesting way to perceive life. And another element that I can add to this is that if you've ever played a video game and you've heard of cheat codes, where you can make it so that your character can't die, or so that your character is always successful. It's fun at first. You go, oh, yay, I'm going to get to play this game that's so hard, but I don't have to work so hard. I get to see the vistas of the game. I get to see the whole experience. Well, when you do that and you sit down and you start playing it, at first it's very exciting. But not too long afterwards, you say, well, wait a minute, I'm completely bored, because the challenge is gone. There's nothing to do here. I'm just running along and getting through everything and successfully completing every mission. Why am I doing this? I don't really care anymore. So why would we, and how does that relate to this life? We forget why we're here. We forget that we are infinite beings intentionally, so that we can take this experience seriously. If we all knew that we were infinite beings, would we really try that hard? We'd go, oh, here comes a car. Let's just go ahead and step in front of it and see what that experience feels like. Because we would know we were just playing a game. I don't know how many times you could just take a character and jump off the cliff just because it's kind of funny in a video game. We would do that potentially in this life, and then we wouldn't take it seriously, and we wouldn't get the lessons, and we wouldn't have the full essence of the experience.
Mm. And so from an existential point of view, evidently something was grossly missing for you in that field of play. And then in 2013, you had an awakening, you had an epiphany. Tell us what happened.
I had an ayahuasca experience. So I was completely raised by a scientific mindset. My grandfather was a chemist, my father an electrical engineer, all around engineers. So I grew up in a household that believed that we were to turn to mud when we died, and that that science could explain everything. We hadn't figured out all of science yet, but science would eventually be able to explain everything, and that there is no spiritual or supernatural concepts happening. So it wasn't until that ayahuasca experience that all of a sudden I realized, because instantly, as it began, there was a voice of universal knowledge that spoke to me and told me that I could ask it any question that I wanted to. As soon as I realized this and felt it, I instantly took all that scientific knowledge and said, nope, this doesn't apply, because there is no way that science is going to explain this to me. I'm now a child in an all new world, and I get to ask the master what the heck is going on. And so I did. I just sat and asked question after question after question, and I was just given the answers every time I asked. And then after the ayahuasca experience was complete, I could continue to speak to that. I could speak to that voice indefinitely ever since.
And I'm sure many of our audience are very familiar what the nature of ayahuasca is. But in a sentence, I wonder if you could synthesize the nature and the experience that drew you to ayahuasca.
Oh, what drew me to ayahuasca?
Well, let's just define ayahuasca, and then we'll go on, because I'm interested in the questions that you asked.
Okay. Well, I had no idea what I was about to do. I did not, it was almost sprung on me. I did not go to Peru to do this. I did not seek it out at all. It showed up at my house, and someone said, hey, we're going to do this. And he called it oral DMT. He didn't even call it ayahuasca. So I knew nothing about what I was getting myself into. So I was really surprised by the whole thing. And the synthesis, it does open your channel to be able to speak to whatever entity, whatever being, whatever insight comes through. It's like it's like talking to your own intuition directly.
So my awareness, if I may add, is that ayahuasca is actually a brew, a tea, where the shaman in the Amazon takes two independent vines, two leaves, that actually, if they're mixed with anything else, can be highly poisonous. And so the shaman, I was taught in Peru, that the shaman actually hear the sound of each plant. They recognize the signature note of each plant. So they know which plants are harmonious, and therefore they gather them, bring the leaves together, create a mulch, which the tea eventually is drawn out of, and that produces a psychotropic experience. What was the first question that you asked as you moved into the experience?
How should I live? I did an icebreaker question. I just knew immediately, okay, this is special. How should I live? And the answer that I received was, you need to love more. And I didn't understand even what that meant, because of course I just loved those that were close to me. I loved my family and some of my friends, I guess. And so in that moment, it showed me the earth, or at least a planet. And I knew that that planet was me. And it also showed nebula and stars and planets and this beautiful starscape outside of the planet. And you know how you can kind of see in some pictures the atmosphere around Earth? There's like this little gap. Well, that gap was there. And I knew immediately that because I didn't love all, I was prevented from actually being able to see or experience the beauty and the vista that was available to me. And so through that visual, I knew why I needed to love all. I still didn't know how or what that process looked like, but it was a fantastic answer to my first question.
Amazing. And so now, retrospectively, over the last 10 years, you've gathered so many experiences and so much more knowing about the content, the quality, and the visionary aspect of your love. And perhaps, could you share maybe 3 major skills, core tools of how we can become more loving? Because we're really talking about unconditionality, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, the biggest one is to recognize that everything is exactly as it should be, or as it was intended. That everything that you are and everything that you experience is exactly part of the divine plan. And that even means all the terrible things that happen, all the awful things that we see and experience every day, and that people are suffering, animals are suffering, whatever it is, all the negativity and all the beauty. We live on a paradise planet. It's all set up. So instead of saying, well, this person is wrong and this thing is no good and this other thing isn't good enough, and oh my gosh, look at all these terrible things we're doing. Yeah, we can say those things, but back in the back of our minds, at least in our hearts, we have to know that all of that is part of that plan. And who are we to know if that plan is going right or wrong? The only thing that we actually truly know is that it's always going right. And there's nothing that we have to worry about whatsoever. And if we were to suffer in terrible ways, that's part of the plan. If we were to thrive in amazing ways, that's part of the plan. And that moment when you really realize that it wasn't like Source Creator was just making some soup and he accidentally added some extra stuff to it that wasn't supposed to be in the soup. Whoops. And now we have Earth and everything else that's going on in it. Of course that didn't happen. There is no such thing as a mistake. Everything that we've ever done has been perfect.
Mm.
You've never made a mistake in your entire life because it's impossible. From this place, we can absolutely have unconditional love for all, and unconditional love for ourselves, which is one of the most difficult things to do.
Beautiful. And so as you tune into the nature of unconditionality, the unconditional love spectrum, if we were to use maybe 3 heart core tools to bring us back into the unconditional love, what would they be?
Well, like I said, that one is number one, is recognizing that everything is exactly as it should be.
And how does that make one feel?
It removes judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment is the cause of all of the non-love, right? Whatever the non-love is, judging things. But judging things is a very human characteristic. It's very important for us throughout our history that we've judged, because we have to judge and say, oh, this person didn't collect enough berries. This is going to be a problem. We have to let them know that they need to do more. Or you've got to judge ourselves, because if we make a big enough mistake, we'll be ousted from the tribe and be out into the wilderness, and who knows what's going to happen to us. So judgment is very much a human experience. So to go into unconditional love means an absolute lack of judgment.
Beautiful.
And you still want a third one, so I want to dive in.
Let's say that's number 1. What about number 2?
Okay, very good.
So here we are living in non-judgment. Everybody's feeling this, right, guys? Just saying quick hello to Deborah, Dawn, and Arjan. Wow, Adaz, all these wonderful people. Sarah, Destine, Lauren, I think Tapaya, all you wonderful people. So we're onto something really cool here. Unconditional love. And so therefore, here we are experiencing complete non-judgment. We are in complete acceptance of everything that is taking place in this moment, without and within. And then what happens?
Well, we realize that everything that exists is us, and that everything that we are is everything that exists. So, the sentence is often, I am source. There is nothing else to be. There is no non-sourceness. Everything that exists is made of unconditional love. Even the things that you do not like, that's still unconditional love. So here we are in a place of unconditional love, made of unconditional love. And it is the human experience that is distracting us from that truth. And the way that I look at it is, okay, let's imagine that you are just the creator from the creator's perspective. I am source, and maybe I haven't even created anything yet. And so everything that exists, whatever that is that you have kind of created, is unconditional love. So here I am looking at all of this, knowing that I'm an infinite being, knowing that there's nothing that can ever go wrong. I can never have any problems. And so you might say, well, wait a minute. If all that exists is unconditional love, and I know everything that's going to happen and everything that has happened, and I just live in the infinite now, well, I want to experience some other frequencies. Maybe I want to experience something that is not just unconditional love. Well, how could I do that? Well, I could do that if I created a place where there are beings on it that didn't know that I existed. Okay, let's do that. Well, that's interesting. I kind of still know everything that's going on, so I'm still not that thrilled with it. Well, let's make it so they can die. Ooh, wow, all kinds of interesting things happen then, because now you've got these beings that are walking around going, oh my gosh, I've got to not do this, or I've got to do that. I have to effort, and I have to avoid, and I have to, and there's fear, and there's all these emotions that come in.
Okay. But you see, where you're taking us is into the field of the ego. Now, what about moving into the non-judgment of unconditionality? And as a result of this, we are so humbled by the mightiness of the beauty of cosmic love that we move into profound gratitude for our lives and for all that takes place in our lives, even the dark spots that have led us into the epiphany, the long dark night of the soul. So that gratitude floods through us in such extraordinary ways that we really begin to value the enormity of what the external regions of consciousness are all about, and how they're merely an outer manifestation of an inner reality, which then moves us into, but there are pockets of darkness within me, and I'm seeing them without. But what I need to do now is simply live the embodiment of forgiveness.
Most certainly. But there is no such thing as good and bad.
Indeed. Well, that's where forgiveness really comes in, you see, because there's no intellectual abstractionist quality about that's good, that's bad, that's right, that's wrong. It just purely is energy that we regard as having coherence or incoherence, which is very different from saying that's wrong and this is right, because it's always about the ego grabbing hold, isn't it? So what was the last question that you asked?
Oh, the last question that I asked was, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but the last question that I asked the voice of universal knowledge was, because I was asking such divine questions up until this point, was I had some real estate, and it was just after the real estate crash. And I said, so what's going to happen with this whole real estate thing anyway? And they said, well, we don't want you to fail, but we don't want you to succeed either. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Like, I'm taking care of my tenants. I'm doing something good here. And I said, why? And they said a word that I had never used. And that word was greed. And I thought, what do you mean? I'm not being greedy. And then I realized that I wasn't doing it out of passion. I was doing it so that I could be safe, be comfortable, and not have to worry about safety and all of that. So it totally made sense. And it made me realize that all I need to do is follow my passion at all times, where my heart leads me. And I'll be in the right place.
Beautiful, beautiful. And of course, we can all relate to that, because we all know what it was like as a child to try and feel ways of controlling the other children or the situation in which we were placed through greed. Must have, must have, must have, which is the assertion of will that we're all learning to use as a child. But at the same time, it suddenly becomes polluted and moves us in all sorts of inappropriate directions.
Yes.
And then you opened up the most extraordinary vistas within your consciousness, where you found yourself talking with ultra-terrestrial beings. Do tell us, how did you meet the Hathors?
Well, they were with me the whole time. And throughout that experience, after the ayahuasca, I was constantly having this voice that I could talk to anytime I wanted to. And I would ask them, who is this? Like, who am I speaking to? And they almost always said, it's not important. What's important is the message. What's important is the healing. Who we are is not important. And I realized that we like to put things in boxes. We like to say, this is this person, and this person says this. This is this other person, and this other person says this. It's a safety mechanism. It's a categorization. And so it wasn't really important who it was that I was speaking to. So, but I still found out. And the way that I found out was I went to a channel, and she channeled in all this information for me, who I was working with. And I said, okay, well, that's really interesting. The Hathors, I've never heard of them. The Arcturians, the Andromedans. Okay, that sounds good. But I wasn't sure. And so I actually went to another channel. They didn't have any idea. And I asked the question, and it was the same group. And I still even did it one more time because I still had that science-based background, right? And I wanted to get that confirmation. And when I did, I finally said, okay, this is who I'm speaking to. Sorry, guys, I found out who you were, and still did it anyway. And then what I realized is I picked up a book. It was the Hathor Material by Tom Kenyon. And I'm reading that book going, oh my gosh, I am being fed what is being written here right before I read it, right? Like I was getting the information and then I was reading it right in front of myself. So I knew that they were there giving me all of that. And there are so many synchronicities that occurred as I worked on my comic book, Righteous, the graphic novel, and more things were showing up. There's a character in the graphic novel that I had created, because I didn't do the art myself, I hired that done, that I had created and had someone create for me. And it was exactly a Hathor, and I didn't know it because I didn't know what the Hathors looked like yet. So those were the ways that I found out. And then when I do my healing work, they tell me what to say. They tell me what vocal tone to use. And they taught me everything about how to help others.
Mm-hmm. And how does it feel when they're speaking with you?
It is so hard to describe. Poor English words. It is a vibration. It is a tingling sensation. And then it is a voice that doesn't sound like my own. It is a voice that uses terminology that I don't use. And someone might ask me a question and I'll think to myself, wow, I have no idea what the answer to this question is. And then I just start talking, and then they come through and they talk through me. So then I'm like watching myself talk going, oh, that's pretty good. Like that's a good answer to that question. I got to remember that.
I believe that we've become highly cerebralized, particularly over the last 450 years since the age of enlightenment. The field of study that I've always specialized in within the entertainment industry are the great words of Shakespeare and his contemporaries. And when we look into the magic of Shakespeare's language, which of course, as we know, is very alive today in certain regions, we begin to realize that most of the language is very vowel rich. And when we're actually tuning into vowel enriched language, we automatically move into the profundity of what feeling's all about. So we become very used to being able to describe a breadth or a spectrum of feelings from a feeling literacy rather than a cerebral literacy. The difficulty I've experienced is that if we just stay in a zone of quantification, we miss out on the qualitative. We miss out on the very deep essence aspect. And one of the great theses, or one of the great projects that I have in the world, is encouraging people to really identify what they're feeling. And what I've discovered is that we're short of words. So we evidently need to move into a field of superlatives where we begin to understand what joy really is, what delight really is, what pleasure really is, what aloneness means, and what all oneness means, what wonder means, and what awe means. And then we begin to open up a very vowel-rich space within ourselves, which takes us back into the all oneness of being. And I believe that that's really why identifying things through name is so important, because after all, in a very atavistic way, we read in Genesis, God said to Adam, go and name everything in the garden. Because when we give something a name, it takes on an essence that is the identifiable naming or recognition of what the entity is that holds the essence. And there are many indigenous tribes that don't have a written language. They just have a spoken language because they feel that if you write, automatically you seal the substance of time. It becomes concretized rather than it being constantly fluid and flowing. You also have wonderful conversations with the Arcturians and the Andromedans. And what are the quality of those conversations? Are they very different from the Hathors?
No, and like I said, when I ask, I don't get definitive answers. So I stopped trying to figure that out. Again, I didn't want to continue to try to put them into categories. So it's probably a collective of all of those groups that are talking to me at any one time, and that energy signature does exist. There is a difference, but it's so subtle that it's not even worth trying to express or explain.
Mm, 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 mm. And so, as a result of these rich experiences, you began to develop the modality of your soul essence activations. Please do tell us. It sounds absolutely fascinating. What is a soul essence activation for you?
So it is bringing it first of all, it is raising the vibrational frequency of the individual when I do the activation in every case. In addition to that, it can be very targeted. So I can target an emotion, for instance. So let's say you're experiencing an extreme emotion at any one moment. I can go ahead and change the frequency of the emotion that you're tying into, because all emotions are frequencies. So if we are in a very extreme fear frequency, and we do a fear retuning activation, then all of a sudden you tune into a different fear frequency that may be way less complicated, difficult, challenging to deal with. You'll be able to think clearer or handle the situation better. And so then you can even step back and go, oh, okay, I was just all up in that fear situation and I was in fight or flight mode. And now I can actually look at it, evaluate it, integrate it, and decide how I want to proceed. That's one kind of aspect of it. But the main soul essence activation is bringing forward, it's crystallizing and bringing forward some of the best aspects of your past, maybe your past life, or the essence of whatever it is that you need to have improved for this particular being that you are, for this particular mission that you're on. And that can come in the form of all kinds of things. It could be adding confidence. It could be helping you feel more grounded, or helping you feel more safe in an unsafe situation.
And when you speak of frequencies and the harmonics and tonality, are there specific sound frequencies that you use to help your clients to shift from negative into positive, or from a state of disempowerment into a state of pure joy?
Yes, but it's interesting because the frequency might be different each time. And so I just listen to whatever tone I hear in my head and then replicate that tone. And the toning is one of many aspects of what they ask me to do. Another thing they ask me to do is actually almost just a shouting moment. I'll make a very loud, quick sound and a shift will occur. And then, or I'll even have body motions that kind of come in and take over my body. And so all of these different aspects are happening, and I'm just following the guidance. I'm setting the intention, I'm receiving the guidance, and then I'm acting on that guidance.
And do you have a favorite frequency that often comes up?
No, I just allow for whatever to come through. I don't tie into it at all. It's whatever it's supposed to be from that perspective. I'm sure if you listen to my tones, you'd probably hear some tone that dominates the others, but I couldn't even tell you which one that would be.
And have you, when you speak of tones, do you have musical background?
Not so much. I've done a little bit of music on my own for fun, but no, not really. It's like I said, I'm just hearing the tone in my head and I'm replicating it.
And so would you describe that as being cognitive or intuitive when you hear the tone in your head? I notice you constantly refer to hearing the tone in your head as opposed to in the whole of your physiology.
Yeah. Yeah, they communicate with me very much through the head. Like I hear the voice or I hear the tone, and so it's almost like a thought that I didn't generate myself.
Hmm. Hmm. And would you like to expand deeper into the body?
I would most certainly be open to it. Yes.
Hmm. Hmm. Because obviously, when we look into esoteric sound making, that there are certain patterns of behavior that can be explored to open up the physiology of sound through the whole of the bodies. I mean, so for example, one of the things that I've done for many years is to chant through each of the chakras, and they each have a different tone. So we move from a deep
Right.
into and bring in all the harmonics.
Yeah.
And when we do this, we obviously shift the frequency of sound through our bodies, because the lower we become, the body tends to become more dense in terms of the way that we experience the substance of feeling.
Yeah.
Amazing. And of course, listening to Tom when he uses his divine song can be highly illuminating.
Most
Have you ever been with him where he's sung?
Not in person. I've only been able to watch the material. I'm pretty sure he's retired now, so it's impossible to get an audience, to be an audience for him.
Yeah, he has retired. He made the Songs of the Earth video, and then he sort of moved aside. It's interesting because I know Tom quite well. I haven't seen him for a very long time. He's gone very quiet, and we're of the same age. And it's interesting knowing that he's retired, whereas I've only just started. It's interesting corollary.
Sure. Yeah.
And I do remember the first time I witnessed Tom, because I'd heard a lot about him, and I was invited to the World Sound Healers Association in San Francisco. I think this was in the early part of this century, the 21st century. And he introduced his work to us in a very psychotherapeutic way. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, but is there a little bit more? Because I've heard about a unique originality that arises out of this gentleman. And then suddenly he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing. And I don't know what will come through, but I think you'll possibly hear archetypal voices come through. And he started firstly playing crystal singing bowls. So there was almost as though there was a drone sound moving in the background. And then he started to sing. And of course, as you know, he has a 4.5 octave range. So he is actually able to span vast vistas of sound. And it was mesmerizing. I was completely transfixed and transfigured and transmogrified. I remember he sang for about 25 minutes, and I was completely, my spinal column, my pranic cord was completely erect all the way through it. And I remember I could not speak for about 3 hours afterwards. It had such a profound effect on my cells and through through all the varying synapses in my body. Just absolutely extraordinary. So, if anybody's interested, do go to Tom Kenyon's website, as well as I'll be introducing you to Xane's website in a moment. I know a number of people who are coming through have had experiences. There are star seeds with us who've had experience of communication with galactic councils. And Sumatras, for example, says, is it the Galactic Council of Light that you're communicating with?
Yeah, and as far as I know, not specifically them. I do know of them, but like I said, they don't come in and say, "Hey, we're the Arcturians. Hey, we're the Pleiadians." They don't tell me, and I think they do that on purpose because I can teach that lesson to others. That it doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is what the message is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and of course, there is another virtue, which is we can identify, and that opens up the vista of what that particular stream of consciousness is all about. Sumatra, if you're interested, just tune into the work that I've been doing over the last 30 bleep, bleep, bleep years, having met a group of angels, 12 angels, that refer to themselves as being the angels of Atlantis, because they are very ancient beings. In Kabbalah, they're known as the Malakim, and they work in association with the Galactic Council of Light, that we know in Kabbalah as the Malkai Zedek. which we hear the word Melchizedek, and they are the priest kings or the priest queens. That's the intergalactic council, or the Great White Brotherhood, the Great White Sisterhood, and so. This is all very exciting. Tell us more about the rich novel series, Righteous, that you engaged in.
All right. So this was a concept that struck me when I realized, what would happen if everyone in the world just suddenly woke up completely dedicated to helping others, that no matter what, they did not worry about survival for themselves. They did not worry about making enough food or being loved or anything like that. All they focused on was just helping others. And I realized that if everyone on the planet woke up from that at that moment, that same day, with that same inclination, that we would essentially be launched into a utopian society almost immediately, because that's all we would do. We would get up and say, oh, I need to make sure I help my neighbor, and I need to make sure, and people would, politicians would go to work and go, I don't know what we've been doing all this time, but now all we're going to do is help people. So let's come up with the best ways to do that and not worry about all this other crap that's been a part of our lives and a part of politics for so long. So I started kind of writing a story like this, and I didn't get very far before I went, well, there's no conflict here. I mean, there's a little bit of conflict here because maybe people would disagree as to how to help others. But for the most part, we just launch immediately into a utopian society. So I went, well, that's probably not going to work very well. It's not going to be a very compelling story. So I'm going to have to do something a little bit different. So I modified it slightly and just said that one person was going to wake up with this inclination, and that then we were going to have a man versus nature or man versus society sort of story. And I thought, I'm going to add in one more piece of the supernatural to this, and that is that every time they help someone, that person now is compelled to help others as well. So it can spread every time you help someone, the next person and the next person. And so that created a very rich, epic possibility of this slowly spreading across the world, and other people figuring out what's happening. And maybe they don't want such a thing because they're very tied to life as it is. And so we have natural conflict that way as people try to resist this movement that's going across the world. And so it was my way of creating spirituality, an understanding of spirituality and awakening for the masses, because it's written if you remember the movie Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey, it's very similar in that sort of, what do I want to say? That mood or tone.
And so do you feel that there's purpose in this dystopian culture?
Oh, yes, most certainly there is. But what's interesting is that when you read a piece of entertainment or experience a piece of entertainment, that instead of the conflict being an asteroid about to crash onto the planet, instead of it being something about how now there's a new threat that we all have to band together to fight against, but to actually say, you know what, the things that are going on in this world is plenty bad enough. So let's see what we can do to fix that. Then all of a sudden, now you're watching a piece of entertainment that isn't just, oh, how are we going to solve this external problem? But it's, wait, we can actually solve this internal problem that has been going on for as long as we can remember. And maybe it starts to open some minds. And most certainly I received messages from people who started reading it and saying, oh my gosh, I realized that I've been selfish this whole time, that I've been just trying to make money for myself. I've gone out and volunteered now. Or someone who said, my CEO was not doing all of their work on the up and up. So I went to my CEO's office and I was channeling a comic book, and I said, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do it this way anymore. And they were appreciative of me coming in and doing that. So in that way, to be able to make some sort of actionable changes based on just reading a piece of entertainment, that's a really powerful method. And it's it's very much a huge part of who I am. As we started the conversation talking about, I came from the video game industry.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, the illustration that you give is very greed bound, isn't it? And then, moving away from greed, we move deep into compassion, and we realize that we're all in this together. And that can also be one of the great gems or precious stones that arise out of unconditionality. And so we begin to share on a very deep, genuine level. Which is, after all, what the Ukrainian people are trying to do at this time. They're trying to, through the valiance, through the fortitude of the protective mechanisms for their vital culture, their sovereignty, and their nationhood, they're trying to say no to the aggressor. And by this, they have electrified the consciousness of the world in understanding where other systems of greed lie, not so far away. I mean, literally in one's own family or in one's own office, and how by looking into the extraordinary courage of shift that we can move into a totally different tonality and therefore recognize truly that love is all there is.
Yeah, it's amazing how easy it is to actually fix our problems.
Yeah.
It really is shockingly easy. And if you think about, our monetary system is an incentive program, incentivizing us to take action and incentivizing us to take selfish action. So what if there was a system in place that incentivized us to take compassionate action? Then all of a sudden, not only would we start doing it, but then we would realize the rewards and benefits that come from deep within, that feeling of helping others. And it would permeate our life. And all of a sudden, so many lives would start to have meaning, because so many people say, I don't have meaning in my life, and I don't understand why. I've got the perfect job and I make all the money and I've got the beautiful house. Why am I still missing something? It's generally that's why, because we come pre-programmed with this need to help each other and help our tribe members and help our community, and yet we're incentivized to just help ourselves or our immediate family.
So this is amazing, Xane. And as you look at the next 10 years, what is the trajectory that you're moving yourself to upon, or indeed, do you have, if we see that our purpose is to optimize our creativity full of love and joy, then what would be the optimized level of creativity looking forward in 10 years' time?
It's a very good question that I'm experiencing right now, because I'm in a place of transition for sure. And yet all I have to do is go back to the heart-centered place and say, to help people, whatever that looks like. I'm not going to be specifically unhappy as long as I get to help people. Maybe I can help people at a grand scale. Maybe I help them at an individual level. Whatever is right. And whatever I feel passionate about doing is what I'm going to pursue.
Yes. And do you feel that your passion arises from a deep desire?
Such a good question. I think that it arises from excitement more than it does desire. Because desiring is essentially saying to the universe, not good enough.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, it is.
A desire to hold someone when they're in need of love.
Desire comes from a place of lack and deficiency. Desire says, I don't have everything that I need more.
Desire is an atavistic impulse. Then it actually moves
pre-programmed in us.
Then it moves into the perception of greed. Yeah. So again, we move into a really interesting landscape, which is about the purpose of our feelings and how I believe that feeling is the language of the soul, not thinking. That if we can actually organize this into being a compass, we move into a very, very rich vein of activity where we begin to feel that impulses like desire and creativity and excitement actually all arise out of the most extraordinary crucible of feeling that I believe is reflected within within the cosmos, this miracle-minded nature of the cosmos. What created a supernova? How does a small acorn create a mighty oak? And how do those elements of the sperm and the ovum ignite into creating human life? The mystery of this, of course, our world of science has a way of being able to define and categorize all of the varying elements. But actually, there is always the mystery that moves us forward. I feel that the mystery arises out of the desire to know, to experience.
Yeah. And I agree with you in that we are miracles observing miracles constantly. That is all that exists, is a constant state of miracleness. and when, like your example, or the fact, I love this fact that we drive around in these vehicles where there are harnessed explosions going on just like a few feet from our face, and we just go, yeah, that's just the way things are. Like, wait a minute, what do we do? Like, it's amazing. Every little aspect that's going on is essentially a miracle. And when we sit back and really look at it and enjoy it for its bewilderness, bewilderment, then you can just be, I think you move into gratitude and just, I'm so grateful that I get to experience all this and see it and feel it. We really live in an incredible experience.
Wow. And this is a very interesting time to be alive on planet Earth, because we see this rich fervor of expansion in our consciousness, particularly to do with awakening our spirit, which I sense is a movement back to wholeness. And then we see around the world fragmentation. And so, being the master magician that you are, if you were actually given the opportunity to be able to just create a spell, and obviously it's going to be a spell of love and a spell of magic and a spell of miracles, what would that spell be in relation to some of the troubles that we see occurring around the world at this time?
Yeah, I think that it would have to be pretty much the theme of righteous, to just help each other. Help each other, help the planet, help the animals, help everything, just help. And amazing things would happen.
We have somebody in the chat box called One Love, and they're leaving all sorts of wonderful emojis. And yeah. And then please, we have a couple of minutes left, and anybody listening in, please, do, if you wish to ask Xane a question, I know he'll be absolutely thrilled in answering it. Creating life or just passing at a very energy from the dawn of life to crowd. Any questions? Everyone has always done that. What's changing? Anyway, so yeah, I suppose that's what a chat is. Anybody can chat away. But are there any questions that you'd like to ask, bearing in mind what you're hearing us discuss? Bless you all for coming. Yes, lots and lots of love to Stephanie in Alaska. The more we back off on asking how little can I live well on. Sorry, it doesn't make sense. Thank you, David. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, why don't I jump in and just say one other thing, and that is that one of the main things that I do is I help people who are stricken with negative entity attachments. And I do that through many of the topics that we're talking about here, because you could go to someone and have them remove your attachment for you. But if you don't do that inner work, if you don't realize your vibrational frequency, if you don't step into your power, if you don't see your divine nature, then that entity experience will just return to you. So it is all about training people. And in many cases, those who have negative entity attachments are just beginning their journey. So it's a very rewarding experience to be able to bring them into a place of peace and harmony, and the ability to handle whatever comes their way, no matter how difficult it might be.
Beautiful. Xane, thank you so much. We've come to our point of completion in our hour. So bless you for coming forth and sharing all of these soul-searching propositions and possibilities with us. Indeed, they are infinite. And to all you wonderful people, thank you so much for tuning in. There will be a little bit of a break as we course through the wonder of the conjunct between, well, I won't even go into the complex astrology because it's all absolutely extraordinary. But you know, I will be coming back with a group of wonderful ladies in
somebody is saying that the link is wrong. Bunny says, Stuart, wait, the link is wrong. I don't know what she's referring to, but
neither do I. And somebody called Stuart is STU, and I'm an STW, so I don't own up to that. You see. Xane, thank you. Stay where you are, please. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful Easter. Much love go with you. Namaste, namaste. Thank you, Ryan.